Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Hold My Drink, where we navigate the news and politics with a chaser of civility. I'm your host, Jen, inviting you to grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and imagine with us how to create a new American identity together. Today, I have Ron McFarland joining me on Hold My Drink. Ron is a secondary elementary teacher in business technology in Denver, Colorado for over 30 years. He's retired now. He also coaches football, and he presently lives in Ames, Iowa, where he attended the University of Iowa. Or is it Iowa State, Ron?
Cyclones, Iowa State.
Iowa State. And there he played football, and he was in a all Big Eight player and second team All American. And even though he's retired, that is his passion. He continues to help at the university, coaching students and football players. He also volunteers with hospice, with the Stephen Ministry. And I am so excited to welcome him here today. You know, Ron, my first question for you always is, what's in your cup?
Well, I tell you what, my cup I'm drinking root beer, but without the root. So you get that. I'm drinking a basic man drink, a big, huge one. It's called Miller Lite. That's
All
what I am
right.
drinking. Yeah,
Well, that's okay because I've got a hot toddy.
yeah.
It's got, Austin is nowhere near as cold as Iowa. However, today it like actually went down into the 70s. So I was
Yeah,
like, hey,
yeah,
hot toddy.
yeah. We're about 40 some degrees, so I guess we should switch drinks. But that's okay. I'm in the man cave, so that's okay. That makes it appropriate. So.
Well, Ron, I thank you for joining me as the co-host today. My big thing that I wanted to talk to you about is, you and I know each other from Braver Angels, and you're a little bit of a unicorn as a Black conservative.
Sure.
And I know you can only speak for yourself because we're all individuals, and Ron McFarland, the football coach and teacher, can only speak for himself. But one of the big questions, and I think this is a question that a lot of people are having as they look at the election that we're still working through. And there was a huge outpouring or turnout, excuse me, of minority votes
Yeah.
and that were unexpected in the Trump election. And I think a lot of white progressives were like, whoa, I mean, everyone was just expecting this landslide. And, everyone always often sees, I won't say always, but stereotypically, minorities go to the Democrat Party. So the turnout of this particular election came as a surprise to some people
Right.
and how close it was. So my first question for you is, what who is Ron McFarland, first of all? How did you grow up, and how did you come to have your certain political views, and what do they mean for you?
Well, first of all, I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the West End, Laura Holmes projects, and had mom and dad together. But my life was full of trials and headaches. I was influenced by my father, uh, and as far as the Republican Party, my mother was deeply religious. My father, that's still a question mark. But anyway, he didn't disavow her influences on me and my siblings. But anyway, he always had a book in his hand. And even though he influenced me greatly, he didn't make some of the greatest choices in life. So between my mom and dad, they had this love hate relationship, so to speak. And in that process, they were separated, and then my mom came down with cancer. And meanwhile, we were put into what we call a temporary place, but it ended up being a year and a half in an orphanage. And that whole experience made Ron McFarland actually not the one you see now, but mean and full of anger because it was a very racist place. It was called Allen House in Cincinnati, and it was an orphanage. And they reminded me every day of my color.
Really?
So Yeah, it was, go to sleep there. We had to sleep there. We had to go to school there, and I was about 7, 8 years old when this happened. I was there almost a year and a half, and eventually my father and mom got back together, and then unfortunately when I was 10, she died of cancer. So then I went to live with my grandmother, but my father still influenced me. Like I say, he always had a book. He was a very intelligent man, made bad choices. At the time, it affected our family. He gave money to my grandmother and this and that. And so he always told me, I'll see you at the pool room. Well, that was his saying that he loved to play pool, but he also held court there and he talked about politics. And usually my uncles, my aunts, and all this, they would be there. And sometimes he would bring me, and I would just was like a fly on the wall, and I listened to him. And then he would say, I am a Republican, but I'm registered as a Democrat. Ha ha ha. He'd be sarcastic with it. And then he would remind me of what we call, and you're probably familiar with this term, the big lie. And what he meant was the propaganda that both of them spew out. And he said, every side is a dark side for us as colored folks. That was his language. And he said, in America, they're all the same. He said, until something changes for us, we have to be seekers of knowledge. And I had an uncle that was in the Nation of Islam. Okay, so I used to listen to him too, but what he would say was made a lot of sense. Be responsible in the community and save. And he was the first person that told me, said, "Do you know what the greatest invention of the world is?" And I would sit there, and he would say, "Compound interest." And I go, "Whoa, that's something." And so he went on to teach me about saving money and being this and that. So
Was
meanwhile,
your dad or your uncle? Did I
this
miss?
was my uncle that
Okay.
said this.
Okay.
Yeah. In the midst of all these conversations, I was influenced by a lot of people in my family, not only my father, but my uncles, my aunts, and things of that nature. And so uh, my father he even came with this term that I didn't know where he came from. He says, they try to keep us satisfied but stupefied. Now, if you understand what that quote comes from, I later on it comes from Prince Machiavelli, and I'm going. And I
Mm,
when I found that, I said, he read that stuff. So you got to understand. Picture a guy who was a taxi driver. At one time, worked at the post office. And he didn't have the greatest employment at all because he made bad choices. Sometimes he even spent time in jail. So even though he was a smart, intelligent guy, but he made some bad choices. But he really influenced me to read, and I read mostly black heroes, like about Malcolm X, uh, Frederick Douglass. I read most black heroes, and my favorite was Frederick Douglass. So
yeah.
when a lot of people ask me as a black man, "Why are you a Republican?" I usually answer them with his name, Frederick Douglass, and leave it at that. And I watch their face, and then so their reaction. They either know the history of Frederick Douglass, or they don't know Frederick Douglass. So that's how I came to follow. And then he also told me, when you read, don't become the book. And then what he was saying is, use your wisdom and search for truth always, and don't be a victim. Because he always preached about history, and in today's world, you may see some of that where we become victims because of the past of slavery. He said, don't forget it because it's very important. And he was big in the civil rights as well.
Mhm.
So anyway,
But don't become a victim. That's really interesting. And I've got a question for you. But before I do, I love that you brought up Frederick Douglass because I used a quote from him the other
yep,
day. My son used the quote and he botched it a little bit, so I had to look it up. And
yeah,
it was the price of liberty is eternal vigilance.
Exactly.
Eternal,
Yep.
eternal
Yep.
vigilance, and that was
Yep.
something
Yep.
that Frederick Douglass said. And I mean, he's such a powerhouse
Yeah.
in the Black community. Can you tell me a little bit more about what specifically were the Frederick Douglass teachings that impacted you the most? What were some of his words or some of his influence that on just how to be in this world that was you found most
Well,
impactful?
some of the things he believed in dialogue. Okay, he believed in dialogue between everyone, even though he was, he didn't have this big respect for those Southern slave owners, because he escaped. But he was also a believer of equality for all people. He made alliances across all ethnicities, which he said in his words are races. And he had liberal values of the Constitution, which was a big one for me. He was a big believer in the Constitution, even though in the Constitution it does not say anything about slavery and this and that. A lot of people misquoted it because I had a question last night with a lady who, yes, it is in there. I said, no, that was about the vote. That was representative of down south if they getting you three-fourths of a person, that kind of
Mhm.
that argument. And he also was one where um, he talked about being a Republican. Listen, I couldn't quite get that that particular one down, but anyway, but yeah, that was some of his stuff, and he always put the pressure on America about their responsibility for the black man and the black woman.
Mhm.
And he talked about it. He spoke about it, and if I'm not mistaken, he was the first one to run as a candidate, a vice president candidate as well. So those are some of the uh, things that that he inspired me on, especially. He said, "Read, read, read." I like the one thing he says. What shall we? When he was asked this question, he said, "What shall we do with the Negro?" And he goes, he paused and he says, "Nothing. You have screwed us up already. Your interference is doing positive harm." And and so a lot of people take that in a different way. Well, what he's saying is we as a group needs to look at ourselves in the mirror first, and we need to step up to the plate and acknowledge what is going wrong in our community,
Mhm.
and as well as get help, and remind society their responsibility as well, because it's a dual thing. I'm not going to ever throw my people underneath the bus, okay, in public and stuff like that, because there are a lot of when I was young, the single family headed by single family was like 25%, okay,
Mhm.
and now it's something like 75%.
Mhm.
And so, but that's something that needs to be worked on together, and we need to come up with solutions. Yeah.
Together, yeah.
Yep.
And
Together.
one of the things that, you'd mentioned this a little earlier, so going back about, being a victim, one of the things that I find that disturbs me and the narrative I find mostly on the progressive side is this sense of helping and creating more of a victim narrative than a narrative of uplift and of strength. And that's what I saw like in Frederick Douglass's work, John Mercer Langston, a lot of these authors were about, I mean, there is so much resiliency and so much strength in the Black community, but I feel the way the Progressive Party often speaks to the Black community as if they need help.
Yes.
And that to me, I feel is almost as, to use a loaded term, I don't like using the term racist, but I mean, that to me is not what we need to uplift the Black community. What do you think about that? I mean, do you see that difference when you're looking at, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party?
Well, when you say help, I tend to like some of the initiatives that Trump was going to try to do if he had a, well, we'll say after the count the votes, but uh, 4 more years,
Mhm.
where he was going to bring businesses into in the community, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That kind of help is what we actually need. And then I would say education, because I was a teacher for 30 plus years, and I was in a public school setting. And I tell you, vouchers are needed to give parents choices because and then a lot of times as a teacher, you get, what is it, to be in the union, that sort of thing, because it's very strong. And the union has a strong presence in the public school setting. And I think people do that because they're fearful. They're fearful that they're going to lose their jobs. But I think competition, free market,
Yeah.
like what as a Republican believes in, it would only enhance and maybe uplift their salaries if we have a competition. And
Right.
so give people a chance to choose those quality schools because that's where it is. I would have kids come in and they would be 2, 3 grade levels down, and man, it's just a revolving door every day trying to push them up. I mean, I was fortunate enough that I read books when I was a kid, and I read it. I challenged myself and did the math and did all this, but because of peer pressure, I used to try to hide it. I didn't want I didn't I didn't want everybody to know this big old guy, who's playing football, loved loved to read and that kind of stuff. And I was in many fights beyond. I have to tell you that growing up in the day, which is silly. I mean, that's pretty silly. We put that peer pressure on each other.
Mhm.
Oh, you're trying to be white? What's wrong with you? Like that. And so that pressure is there. So anyway, I
Um,
hope I
yeah,
touched it.
Thomas Sowell is a big, I don't know if you've read any of his books, but he's a big proponent of charter schools and
Yes.
giving that choice,
Yeah.
giving particularly our lower income societies and communities more of a choice for education. And for me, I see, and I consider myself conservative. I'm not part of any party. I'm not part of either the Democratic or the Republican Party. But I mean, I just feel that's where we need to put all the money for everyone. We need
Hmm.
to give the resources need to be for our kids so
Hmm.
that they all have the same go at life. And then later on, they can choose what they want to do with that, you know?
Right.
But when we talk about like uplift, that for me is where we need to focus all of our attention. And I don't think that we have been doing a good job at that. But going back to the differences between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party for Black Americans, and for you, Ron, yourself, because again, I know you can only speak for yourself. What do you see are the biggest differences, and why do you lean Republican? Is there something that the Republican Party, seems to offer over and above what you would say the Democratic Party offers?
Well, right off the bat, I have to say uh, we tend to focus on the Constitution, and not so much the Constitution as far as everybody understands the Constitution, our rights, but I think people need to look at constitutional law. Who does what? Who's the responsibility and that type of thing, so they get a grasp of exactly it's liberty and equity. And people, the difference it seems like to me when I'm in conversation with a Democrat that they tend to tie uh, their their values with a question. You see what I'm saying? Like, for instance, if I start talking, I say, "Well, build the wall," they immediately throw out the R word, racism.
Mhm.
Whereas, no, I'm just talking about safety. So I have to clarify what we have to do. Actually, Republicans have to do a better job of identifying what we believe in. We need what we call a brand. And I like the way Trump was doing it. He kept it really simple. I call it the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. But 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 we I believe in limited government. I believe when I was talking to lady the other day, I said, "Well, we believe in federalism," and she goes, "What do you mean by that?" I said, "Well, that means that uh, federal control is limited, small government in Washington, but it's in the local and the state. That's where you get more people involved, and that's where we can make change." And so she goes, "Oh, nobody's ever explained it to me like that." I said, "Well, that's what I mean by keeping it simple, explain
Mhm.
it like that so they don't think that you are hating on people." And then less taxes. It's called, go back when Ronald Reagan was there, Reaganomics, where he said if you reduce the taxes, you'll get more money in because it grows economically. And then it's like, oh, I thought that was being racist against those people who don't have any money. I'm going, no, it produces more if you really study it. I mean, I can't explain to you in like 10-second sound bites like you're used to hearing. But, if we come together and form this relationship, then I can explain it to you step by step.
Mhm.
So, those are some of the few things. I mean, all us Republicans don't believe in the same thing.
No,
I
no,
mean,
girl.
I just happen to my biggest issue is fiscal responsibility. And I have to say, just like this shirt I'm wearing, my whole um, person, my whole life is centered around my faith. And so, because of my faith, I want the best for everyone. And I think it, currently, right now, it's through the Republican Party. Now, don't do they need some ways to attract people of color? And I'm not just talking about Black people, but I'm talking
Mhm.
about Latino. I'm
Mhm.
talking about all phases, women and everything. They need to do a better job of
Mhm.
explaining themselves because it could be easily when people say, "Well, they're racist, they're homophobic, they're this and this and that," all these stereotypes that really is not there. Now, when someone asks me why are you a Republican, it used to make me feel kind of eerie. It's like, okay, why in the heck are you white? Why are you this? Or why are you that? Why are you addressing me like that? I just have a beautiful skin tone. That's all it is. But now I understand it's because they're curious you
Mhm.
know and so throughout my life I've gotten some i I got some weird questions, and then and because of my faith, okay,
Mhm.
uh, I just find a way to control that because actually I can't control it, only through God controls that. It's just how do you react to it, like that. And I use these acronyms. I tell people FEAR is not what I am, but the initials, false evidence appearing real, is what I tell myself consistently when someone says something that's knuckleheaded, So anyway, but yeah, it's life is something else. I could go on and on and tell you I could give you some victimizations. I've been pulled over by the police. I mean, I was a teacher. My first year as a teacher, I was stopped. And I had a tie, shirt and tie. I'm thinking, oh, hallelujah. I've been made. And they pulled me over and had me on the hood of the car, boy. Because of what? My attitude. Because I wasn't having it. I was still, young enough mentally where, why are you stopping me? I haven't done anything. And then I remember those confirmational stories or bias stories that I grew up with in my family that, some of the things that happened to them. And then I just like automatically got angry. That is why it's not as easy when we have these slogans today of Black Lives Matter and this and that. I really understood why it was said, okay? And but I couldn't after I did my research on the group, I go, whoa, they're hijacking the slogan, like that. That's just like back in the day, Black Panthers, like that. I had the whole afro. Now I'm bald headed. I had the whole afro and everything, because I wanted to be a Black Panther and stuff like that. And so easily influenced as a kid. I want action. Give us some action, like that. But now I'm a little bit more mellow. But
Well, tell
yeah.
me, I want to ask you one of the questions I want to ask you is about Black Lives Matter because I think most people in the, conservative who lean conservative have no I mean, like, it just is like, duh, of course it matters.
Hmm.
The problem is with the actual organization. And so some of the things that you look at the organization is, not supportive of the nuclear family and a lot of things that are considered conservative. But honestly, a lot of my friends of all different colors and all all different religions and whatnot, that idea of family is really important to them and it's the bedrock of who they are. And so when you have an organization that is acting suggesting the repealing of something like that, I think that that's where a lot of conservatives are like, whoa, hold on a minute, we had no problem with Black Lives Matter, we have a problem with actual movement.
Right,
Is that, what do
right.
you think, is that what you're seeing? Or
Well, yeah, exactly. Because we don't take time to sit down, and I think it was scripted to be that way by Black Lives Matter. You know, they're not going to explain or let you in on what really is what their cause is. But somebody responsible that people will listen to need to do their homework. And unfortunately, a lot of people aren't doing their homework and they're going on emotion, the slogan. I understand that slogan, Black Lives Matter itself,
yeah,
but you have to separate the two. Okay, the Black Lives Matter itself, uh, slogan is great and it's okay, but underneath it, it's like being Batman. You know, Batman wearing that mask and stuff. Underneath it, Batman is someone else. Okay, and we know it. Is where we know the story about that. And so, but in this case, he's not a philanthropist. A person giving out a lot of money. He's there to try to take over the whole country,
mhm,
and he's saying breakdown of the family unit and the nuclear struggle. When you find out that stuff, and then the Marxist principles of communal thing that we are your family, it's almost like if you think about it, why are young kids, young African American men attracted to gangs? Because they replace the family, a nuclear family, and then they make them feel good. And so, when you feel good, next year, you're deep, knee deep in it, and then you're in this life that you really shouldn't be in. So that's part of it. It needs to be explained civilly. You need to take the slogan and nurture it and love it, but then you need to explain. Now, son, this is why I love you. This is why I'm telling you this. I'm not telling you because I'm a bipartisan, I'm a Republican, and I'm this. I'm telling you because I'm American. And I believe in the Constitution and I believe in our American ways. And this group does not believe in our value system as American. Now, we have some trials we've had in the past and all the different situations that has affected you and our people. But think about it. In the last, and I tell my nieces and nephews this. I said, what in the last 20 years, when have you rode on a bus or in the back and you were forced to ride on that bus, or when you had to drink out a water fountain, or when you called the N word or this and this and that? I said, I have. Your Uncle Ronnie has. And they go, what? You didn't tell us. I said, I was in an orphanage and I was called that. I was arrested 2 times and I didn't do anything. The only thing I did was being black. I said, I've done it, but I am not a victim. And I said, I'm going to remember everything. I'm going to educate myself so I can make sound choices, reasonable choices. But I tell you what, if once, if someone calls me to action, civil rights for people to gain, I will go out there. I will do that.
mhm,
Just because I'm a Republican doesn't mean
right,
I'm
right,
not gonna I forget where I came from. No, no, no,
right.
no, no, no.
And I think
It's
we're
oh,
breaking down the stereotypes here. I think you're
yeah,
absolutely right because
yeah,
we have a lot of stereotypes and that kind of goes back to where I was starting at the very beginning about these stereotypes about minorities following the Democratic Party versus the Republican
yeah,
Party. I like the
yeah.
that things are changing a little bit because it shows that we're individuals. We're not like I don't want to be just seen as Jennifer the white girl or Ron
Right,
the black man, you know? I mean, we are
right.
so much more our life histories are so much richer than that. And I feel that, I said this before, I feel that sometimes my impression is the Democratic Party just lumps people together as
Oh, yeah.
the black group, the Hispanic group, the whatnot. And I see why I would argue that the reason we saw some changes in this last election is because some people are standing up and going, I'm not this group. You can't pigeonhole me. I'm not this
No.
group. I'm not that group. I'm not this group. But look, I've got one last question for you. You know, going back to race, a lot of people, I'm sure you know this, call Trump racist.
Mhm.
And I know
Yeah.
that there was a lot of programs that he was talking about for the Black community. There were great programs that are helping, like, and I agree that we mentioned them before about bringing money in into to businesses, and I love that. I agree with that kind of an uplift. But when people say to you, "Well, Trump's a racist," how do you feel? Do you believe that, or do you think it is? But it's like, okay, he might be, but his policies are still my kind of policies. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, uh, that's just like Republicans being called homophobic or, all the stereotypes and everything. And I look at it as a deflect mechanism. It's like they're deflecting from the big problem. I mean, he could be a racist, okay? He could be. But that is not what my focus is. I'm bipartisan. I want help from either side that's going to go into the community and finally solve the problems that we have. Okay. So I look at it like I'll tell a story. It's like a bridge, okay, is built. All right. And then on this bridge, you have police officers in uniforms at one end. And then these cars cross are red cars. And the police have hatred for the red cars. And so they stop them. And then, the people in the red cars, they get upset and they call the precinct and they complain. So they investigate and they fire the police. All right. So then they hire different cops. And then the next batch of cops, they hate people that drive in blue cars. And then so the blue cars come across and they stop them, and the cycle just keeps repeating. And what my emphasis is that they have forgot about upkeep on the bridge. And so eventually the bridge, they need some repairs. Okay. And I call that you can call it the Constitution, or you can call it the community, or you can call it whatever. It starts breaking down because we are not focusing on the big problem. Now, I'm not saying the things of, the racism or whatever your identity, whatever they're calling it, to stop either car colors is not important, because that is important. But while you're doing that, you need to focus on the main problem of race, of the divide. I remember the first time I heard the word white privilege. I was sitting in a faculty meeting in high school. And I go, at a school that was 90% Latino and black. And I go, what the heck does that have to do with trying to teach Johnny how to read and write? And in my finance class, I said, what's the greatest invention of the world? And then they go, oh, the Great Wall of China. Okay, that's pretty good, but we're in a finance class, son. What do you think? Oh, I don't know, And I said, compound interest. And I had their intention. What is that? And then I start telling them about budgets. I'm telling them about this and this. Those are the type of things I'm talking about. We need to educate them on some of the things that are a little bit more important than that. We need to deal with the race problem, but we need to solve the problem, like you say, the divide and some of the things, and have these conversations out of love. Okay. And all the partisan stuff. And I tell you, one of the biggest thing is the media. I hate to say it, I hate to blame it on one group. And it's on both sides. I mean, I don't even watch cable news anymore.
Well,
So
but I
anyway,
think that you're so right, and we can end on this is I think so many people are afraid to have the conversations that you and I are having today.
yeah, Yeah.
because it's seen, they're afraid of being labeled,
Yeah.
whether they're being like, asking questions, racist or whatnot. That's one of the worst,
Yeah.
labels
Oh,
that
it is.
we throw around indiscriminately these days. And yet, if we don't have these conversations and come together in community across these colors,
Hmm.
and across races and across religions and across all the divides, then we're always just going to keep spinning those wheels. It's like you said, it'll be the red car one day, it'll be the blue car the next day, and we're not having these important conversations. And that's, the main thrust behind everything that I'm doing here in these conversations is to really put out there something that maybe is a little bit unique in how we're talking to each other. So
Yeah.
I'm so excited to keep our relationship going with Braver Angels. We're gonna work our way to changing the world.
If I may say, the first song I ever was taught was by my mother. This
Uh-huh.
little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. If we just keep that philosophy in our hearts and in our soul, and I think that will accomplish a lot. Let your light shine throughout this world to be a servant for all, okay? And base things on love. Because whenever I get in those arguments, I go, time out, time out, time out.
Mhm.
I love you. And
Oh,
that's it. And that's they usually respond or they usually say, well, I guess we gotta walk away from here. And so anyway. But 99.9% of the time I give them that sugar bear smile. That was my nickname in college.
uh-huh.
And I tell them I love them, and then that's it. That's it. So we can have those conversations. I wish more people would do that. I really do.
Well,
I
Ron,
do.
I love you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We need to do more of these type of things. That would be great. Anyway,
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that love and all this with me. And I think we will have plenty more conversations.
right. I'm a Republican because of Frederick
God
Douglass.
bless.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. All
Well,
right.
great having a drink with you, Ron.
Oh yeah, it was good. Even though I forgot my straw. I should have had a
Thank you for listening to this episode of Hold My Drink. Like or subscribe to the show and check out the show notes for links to source material and to our website where you can find what each of us is reading every week, different news with different views. If you have a topic that you would like us to explore, drop us a line. And join us next week as we say, Hold My Drink, and the conversation gets real.